Welcome to the Better Learning Podcast. We have a fun one today. We've been breaking down movies and looking at school-related movies and got connected with Brandon and Ben, who are our hosts of the Cinemast podcast. And we're going to have fun today. Brandon, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having both of us. Excited to be here.
And Ben, nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Excited to talk about this movie.
Yeah, so you guys give a little bit. You guys are brothers, and you guys just really love movies, right?
Yeah. So, I mean the setup of our podcast. So I'm a big cinephile. I love movies. I have TikTok, Instagram. Like I talk movies on there all the time. That's BrandonToksMovies, my name on there. And I've had a podcast on and off basically since 2011 that's movie related. I've done a few different ones, but we started up the Cinemast podcast in 2019. And so it's been going for 5-6 years now. And about a year and a half ago, I got tired of asking for a guest every week. And I had Ben on a couple of episodes and I was like, why don't you just be my co-host? So Ben and I have been rowing this ship. Yeah. So we've been running this ship together now for the last year and a half. And it's been a lot of fun because I'm the cinephile and Ben is not.
Yeah.
Well, which is perfect to talk about. So we've been doing these school-related movies and trying to take like real-life lessons from it. This one, I is just blowing up all of that. So our normal audience that that is really involved in education, working school leaders or on the architect and design side, they're building schools. This is going to be it. We're going to shake it up a little.
This is what not to do. So if you need help knowing what not to do, go ahead and watch this movie.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background, just to
let's hear it.
Let's hear it here.
All right, Battle Royale. Tell me, Brandon, why did you pick this movie?
So today we're talking Kinji Fukasaku's Battle Royale, which is my favorite Kinji Fukasaku film. I'm a big fan of Japanese cinema, and I love his 70s series, Battles of Honor and Humanity. And they're great. But and so when I got reached out to by your producer, Matt, and he was like, hey, we'd love to have you on the show and talk about a movie related to school. And I was like, what's a movie about school that I could just like think of? And I'll be honest, this is the first one I thought of. And so I threw it out there and he jumped on it, and which surprised me. After I sent it, I was like, oh, maybe that's kind of a dumb pick. But actually in rewatching it, I love this movie. I love this movie so much. This is the first Japanese movie I ever saw. Kicked off my love of Japanese cinema. And I love the brutality of it, because what is the most brutal time of life? It is when you are an adolescent. There is nothing more life and death than just being a teenager, when everything feels like life and death. And so what happens when a bunch of kids who view everything as the most dramatic thing, oh my gosh, my homework is late. Oh my gosh, do they like me or not? Who do you like? Who's your crush at school? Am I going to miss the shot in the basketball game? What's more life and death than that? Literal life and death. And so I just think that this is such a genius satire from Kinji Fukasaku. Now, it's also based off of a novel. So he didn't write the original story. But so yeah, I just love how this film kind of satirizes what it's like to be a teenager and puts all of that up against the backdrop of a group of kids having to kill each other.
Ben, you had not seen this until this week here. I mean, for me, I didn't even know this movie existed.
If you listen to our podcast, most movies are first watches for me, and most movies are rewatches for Brandon. And that's the beautiful thing about our podcast is Brandon is such a movie buff, and my favorite movies are like the Fast and Furious movies. I'm like so not that we have this really good dynamic between the two. So when he picks a movie, I did not realize that you picked Battle Royale, Brandon, but now it makes a ton of sense. It typically is me like watching a movie for the first time and just trying to like comprehend what is happening and why is this chosen. However, this movie is a lot of fun. And it does kind of play around with some topics that in high school are just like there, right? There are so many funny little lines, funny little looks that people give in this film. And it's like, man, I remember being a high schooler being like, wait, she actually liked me the whole time? Or, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, I'm actually hanging out with the people I want to. You start to see, and part of, the breakdown is like, there are like little clicks that pop up. There's different things that happen in this movie that are so recognizable in a scenario that will never happen or should never happen. Right.
All right. Well, let me just set it up for the people who have not seen this, which I'm going to assume pretty much everyone in our audience has not seen this movie. But the premise is it is a Japanese movie with subtitles. It is free on Tubi. That was nice to be able to find it on there. Came out in the year 2000. But the premise is that it is a group of ninth graders that are basically a group of 30 in their class. Are basically said, one of you is going to survive this, and you're basically on an island, and whoever is the last person standing is the one who wins and is the survivor, and the other ones are all going to die.
Pretty much.
That's
pretty much the premise.
Now, there is a little bit of extra kind of like, I would say, social and political context within Japan. So if I remember properly, when this book was initially written, there was a lot of issues with the youth and crime and like rebellion against kind of like the honor of the old guard, of the older people in society, particularly when it came to students and teachers. And so this book was basically written as, okay, if this keeps getting out of hand, if we're not able to stop the disrespect from the youth towards the adults, what is the final outcome? And so the book says that, fast forwarding to this like dystopian future where, okay, well, we just have to thin out the population of kids. And so what they do is they randomly select the disrespectful, naughty class of kids and send them to an island and say, all right, well, let's thin out the population of kids and stamp this thing out. And so that's how this happens. That's why Kitano, the teacher in this movie, is our Dr. Keating, so to speak, is the one who randomly selects, quote unquote, this class that disrespected him back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, that opening scene, like when he shows up, to me was just like, what? And like, that's when everything just like kickstarts the movie of like, this is going to be chaos.
Oh, you're talking about when he walks in the room,
when he walks into the
classroom
gathered, and they're like, oh, this is our teacher from 2 years ago. And then he is just like brutal. And the abuse and the chaos begins right there.
Well, I think it's interesting. Sorry to jump ahead. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I think, I want to make sure that we're tying this back to education. It all starts in the classroom. It all starts with the teacher. The teacher is the one that sets the tone for every classroom. And who is the one that commits the first kill out of all 42 students? It is Kitano who throws the throwing knife into that girl's head and kills her first to show how the game works. And in the same way, every teacher, when you walk into your classroom, that very first day, you are setting the tone for how that class should be run. And I've had teachers that have done a great job of that. I've had teachers who've done a terrible job of that. None of them have thrown a throwing knife, but I think that, I think that this movie has a lot of things to glean for educators about best teacher practices, worst teacher practices, and what your students are going through.
All right. So I totally agree with you. I mean, what you'll hear people call this your classroom management of how do you get them? How do you keep them focused on whatever the topic is? I'm sure we will pull in some analogies in here as we go through to some of the awards, but I want to talk about, to me, the moment where I've realized I'm like, oh, this is related to the movie or to the game Fortnite.
Yeah, there's that. There's also Hunger Games, right? There's a bunch of. Well, now it's becoming more popular to have these video games that are exactly that, a battle royale, last man standing, right? as a gamer myself, and Brandon plays games as well, those are some of the most exciting times and also the most defeating times when you don't win, right? You realize, okay, the game is up. And so this one was a lot of fun. And then I did actually read The Hunger Games. I actually read it in Italian. Fun fact. And it was one of those things that I'd never read anything like it. And so watching something that came well before Hunger Games, and I'm quite positive there was some sort of influence in the making of the Hunger Games with this movie. But it was a lot of fun to kind of watch something that, you know, is very popular now, or at least this type of game is.
Yeah. All right. So many questions from me. Do you read most of your books in Italian?
No.
That's
no.
That's
a good question. The answer is no. In fact, I don't really read very much. There was a time in my life I was actually living in Italy, and I read it there. So
all right. So you guys good? Any other like just general things on this movie before we get into some of these award categories?
Let me just double check here, because I'd written a couple of things. I do think it's interesting. Just some additional context setting. I talked about the history in Japan. When this movie came out, this got an extremely like rare rating. So it got an R15, which is like wildly unheard of in Japan. Which basically meant that anyone under 15 couldn't see it. So all the kids age in the movie, like they can't see this movie. And so it was very controversial. You couldn't get it outside of Japan. In fact, up until 2011, there wasn't even like a DVD release. I saw this based off of a torrent back in the day when torrent when it's in its heyday, right? I downloaded this from uTorrent because where I think most people back then kind of heard of this movie was that Quentin Tarantino mentioned that this was his favorite film of the previous 2 decades at that point. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? What is this movie? Can't find it anywhere. And so that kind of buzz generated enough to where Anchor Bay went to Kinji Fukasaku's like statement, was like, hey, we want to put this movie out in America. Yes, it's controversial. Yes, you guys don't want it out, but I think people in the US would love it. Sure enough, it's become this cult hit. They just released the 4K over at Arrow Video. So yeah, that's kind of like, this is a controversial movie. But yeah, glad that now that it's free on Tubi.
Yeah, that's crazy. So my first reaction is I hear like when it's banned, that means like every kid's gonna want to see it in Japan. Definitely. Like, did you were you able to find out like how was this received in Japan?
So in Japan, it was very split. You know, obviously you had some people who were like, people who didn't get the message who saw it and they're like, yeah, because like I said, like this movie came out, I think it came out 8 years after the book had been, no, the year after the book had been released. The book came out, I think 99, and then this came out in 2000. And when that happened, people were like, yes, this is kind of what we need. You know, people who aren't able to read between any lines. But then the other people, and then some people were like, oh, this is terrible. It's kids killing each other. And then there's, you know, the other folks who are like, okay, like I see what this movie is saying, what this movie is doing, what this movie is talking about. And it's brilliantly made. Like this movie is, I think, incredible. So
awesome. All right, so let's dig into some of these categories, and we'll hit some of them. But typically, we're trying to figure out like how this relates to education, and if there's things that we can pull from it. One that we always do is the John Keating Award. Like, was there a teacher or mentor in the movie that really stood out as making an impact on kids' lives? Really, there were 2 teachers that I remember that were in the movie. There was one, their former teacher, that they showed just dead in like the beginning of the movie, and then Kitano.
Yes.
Anyone else that could even be considered in here? Because I actually have a wild card for my winner, but I want to hear what you guys think of it.
I would say, I mean, obviously Kitano is kind of like the one that comes to mind. I think you could make the argument that Kawada could be potentially the Keating Award as well, because he's the one who comes into this. He knows how the Battle Royale works. He's done the game before, and he's kind of showing them the ropes of how to, go through this system. And he's kind of the other statesman of this group. So you could make the argument for a couple of people here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you always look up to coming in as a freshman. I was fortunate enough to have Brandon, who was a junior at the time, when I went into high school. If you have a friend or someone who's gone through before, you always look up to the person that has already gone through it, and you try to learn as much as you can. Kawada winning previously, everyone kind of looked up to him. Right. And so I personally would give it to him. I definitely am not giving it to any of the actual teachers. Because I don't know about you, but definitely not something that I'm learning from. But yeah, for sure. I think Kawada is a great example of someone who has already gone through it and is willing to teach those that were around him, even though he knew what's going to happen to these guys. Let me help ease the pain a little bit.
That's where I landed too, is normally there is an adult, and we talk about in education is one of the main things that school leaders want to make sure is that every kid has some adult connection in that school. It doesn't need to be their primary teacher, but just somewhere where that every kid feels like there is an adult here that I have a connection with and that cares about me. This movie, there was not one of those. I mean, when your teacher's throwing knives and killing people, in there, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's probably not there. So I agree. I thought Kawada was the one. He was like that mentor that was coming in and teaching people the ropes, and it's really powerful. I mean, it's one of those where, as my kids go age through school too, like I just think of like their sports teams and having those kids that are a year or two older as like the captains and the ones that I like, those have been some of the best influences on my kids.
Yeah. And I think Ben and I have had some like amazing teachers in the past. Like some of my biggest heroes in my life still are some of my teachers. And so I think we have some interesting insight here. But one thing that I think is unique about Kawada, if we want to view him as kind of the teacher of this film, is that I think all great teachers are still learning, right? Kawada goes back to BR because he wants to understand why his girlfriend was smiling at the end of when she's dying, right? So he goes back because he still has something to learn. He still wants to understand something that he doesn't quite know yet. And I think that there's, if you want to take that into the larger educational space, I think that some of the best teachers that I know were the humble ones that went into class and were willing to try and learn from us just as much as we learned from them. And so I think, that's a little bit of where I think Kawada also shows that same Keating thing, right? And in the same way that Keating in Good Will Hunting, right?
Dead Poet Society.
Yeah. He's same. It's both Robin Williams. That's where I got confused. That he's doing the same thing in that film, right? Like there's a symbiotic relationship between the teacher and the student in both of these films. Well, all three of those films. Yeah. That best teachers, I think, are trying to have a two-way street with their students.
Yeah. All right. So we got a winner there.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. So going through the cliques, typically there's going to be the stereotypes. This is going to bring in actually what I thought it was super weird. Brandon, you're probably going to tell me all the meaning behind it. But typically you got like the jocks and you got like, like kind of the nerds or, that are in there. There were definitely some cliques and some different ones, but I did not understand the whole basketball scenes that they kept
okay. This is great news. So the basketball scenes are from the director's cut. So I was not sure if on Tubi, because I have it on Blu-ray, so I wasn't sure if I was watching a cut that you guys
Ben,
weren't.
did you have it?
I had all the basketball scenes. Yeah.
All right, great. So the basketball scenes, I think, are there to show the before and after. how close these kids are to each other, how much they really care about each other, and kind of establish what are the kind of connections and social standing of all these characters. Now, if you remember, Mitsuko still is an outcast in that, because once they win the game at the end of the movie, Mitsuko is like, I'm not celebrating with these people. I am the outcast. And so she leaves, which, obviously we see that after we've seen everything that happens on the island pretty much. But if you want to view it linearly, it essentially sets up the kind of person that she is on the island, or at least explains why she's so able to massacre literally anyone that she comes across. But I think that it's there to show that these kids actually care about each other. They actually like each other, despite what they have to do.
That makes sense.
And I think the clique of the girls in the lighthouse is a perfect example of this. People that they actually were all of different, like, other cliques that came together, and they were in the lighthouse all together. And I thought this scene was hilarious, right? They go and they bring what's his name in. They heal him up, and then it's just a bunch of girls cooking and helping each other out. The best part is the accidental poisoning then is just like the betrayal that no one knew was there. We all saw, I remember very distinctly the cliques of girls in my high school that one thing happened and it set them off, and then they were fighting each other for a couple of weeks, and then they would get back together. Unfortunately,
it's Mean Girls.
It is Mean Girls, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this clique could not come back from the fight that they were having because it involved a couple other things. But I thought that 5-minute sequence of them just like yelling at each other, fighting each other, simply because they were trying to get rid of one guy. The one guy basically was the end of all of them because of the mistake that was made.
And how many girl groups do you know from back in high school that ended because of one guy?
All the time.
I liked him first, and now you're dating him. It's not uncommon. And so I think that that's one of like those main threads that this movie is doing, is that how those crushes and those relationships can kill relationships because they are so integral to who we are at that age.
Any other cliques or stereotypes come out there? The only one I can think of is more like the group of, I think it was 2 or 3 of them that were hacking the system. Like you can tell those are going to be like the gamers, the coding, like.
I love the way that he was typing was kind of like, like, sure, whatever. The other clip that I would say more of a stereotype than, well, I felt like, because I was when I was reading through this question, one thing that I kind of felt was that there's less. I think that the film is less about the specific archetypes that we're used to seeing, and more about kind of like that stereotypical like overall experience. About how like all these different people that have these different experiences in lives. There's all these like little groups that are happening, and they don't really attach like a stereotype to them in a lot of cases. Like there's the 2 best friends who are like, I promise that I'll stay alive for you, or whatever they say. Like when the girls get split up, and then they end up finding them both dead, attached to a life raft together. And so I think that the films does have a couple of those cliques, like the girls that hang out together. Yeah. I also think like there's a bit of a stereotype about the transfer student.
Kiriyama. That was my guy, where he comes in. He's the kind of outcast because he doesn't know anyone.
Nobody trusts him.
He decided to be there. Mm-hmm. And you kind of see that, like the kid moves in, his parents move for work or something like that. And it's like,
the new kid.
Who is this guy, right? And then he actually comes in and does the most damage because he's like, I don't have any connections with any of you, so I don't really care about you guys. And in a game like this, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. My favorite stereotype about the transfer student is how Kawada is like, oh yeah, I've got a girlfriend. She doesn't go to this school though. And she actually doesn't exist. Like later he says that he lied when she really does exist. But I thought that was pretty funny. He's like, yeah, she doesn't go here. But
you always got to try to impress the new person.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It's like the new person comes in and everyone's got to like hold, like get their grounding of like, what do you want their reputation to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You've
You've also got the stereotype of the meek little girl, innocent girl student, and the teacher, where there's this kind of like illusion that there is some kind of illicit relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, that was weird.
We don't really see anything unfold other than them like walking around with like ice cream. And he's definitely kind of like subliminally signaling to her that there was some kind of connection that the two of them had. And it seems like he wants to kind of like protect her through the end of the game as well, which I would definitely say I would probably file that under some kind of stereotype.
Yeah. What was he a gym teacher? Did I like, or was he? I was trying to.
Was he
I didn't
the
know
teacher
if
at
like
the beginning?
He's the teacher in the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was their teacher. He just shows up in a gym outfit.
Okay, that's what I couldn't remember. Like if he's just in this, like, yeah.
He's like,
That's
I'm gonna show up to
2000s garb.
I'm gonna show up to work in my tracksuit.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so class clown. Was there anyone who just like had the one-liner, stole the show? I struggle with this one. I have one, but I want to hear what you guys have.
So I would say that I wouldn't call it like a class clown, but someone who stole the show from me, who wasn't a main character, but had her time to shine, which is Mitsuko. I thought her performance, for me, I was like in on her. I thought she like, even though, I mean, we didn't know who won right at the beginning, and so I'm seeing it and I'm going, wow, like I actually really like who she is. Yes, she's a little brutal. She's off on her own. She's taking care of her own business. I thought she was going to be the winner until she wasn't. But I thought Mitsuko and her, I don't know, she was in and out for 45 minutes. Every time she was on screen, I was watching intently to kind of see what she was going to do.
Yeah, I mean the category as you have it listed, Kevin, is who's the person who steals the show whenever they're on screen. I put Mitsuko as well. I think that she steals the show so much that she borderlines on becoming the main character for half the movie.
Yeah.
And what I love, and I'm a movie like this, I love a movie like this that's so deeply satirical because I've probably seen this movie 4 or 5 times now, and I'm still finding like little pieces where I'm like, I don't really understand what he's going for here. Let me try and piece that together. It is interesting that there's only, I think, 2 kids on the entire island who change their clothes. And she's one of them. Or I think there might be 3, because the girl who gets poisoned is in like a tracksuit too. Tracksuit, very, very hot, because very, very hot commodity item on that island. But Mitsuko ends up like, she like showers, she changes her clothes, she's walking around with her hair up in a towel. She's like living the good life. And so and she has a couple good one-liners, but I just like that she's such a she's so brutal. She's like an assassin. She's like the Black Widow of the island.
Yeah. I think that's probably the winner. The one that I put in though was the girl that was in the explainer video. That was like the video game setup. That just cracked me up.
It's so funny.
Explaining the rules
when she does the
game.
And then when you actually see it, it's like, oh no, this is like full blown. Your neck explodes out the front.
Yes, yeah. So that was mine. I kept thinking we just did an episode on Ted Lasso, and did you guys watch Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one episode where Keely is like on the hotel TV loop that they show of what's going on around here, and that's what I kept thinking of. Like
that's
there's
funny.
just like somebody's giving like this explainer video and super peppy.
Have you ever wondered how a simple change in your classroom can revolutionize learning? At K-12, we believe the physical space is key. When we partnered with Gary Community Schools in Indiana, something incredible happened. Their classrooms were outdated and uninspiring. Using our radically student-centered approach, we reimagined their spaces. The transformation was nothing short of amazing. Teachers saw immediate results, students came back from winter break excited, more engaged, collaboration increased, and overall performance improved. One student even shared, "We have new furniture. It's like Christmas all over again." On the first day back, local media came in to cover the story, capturing the joy and excitement of students discovering their new learning environments. See how we can transform your school today. Visit kay-twelve.com to learn more about our innovative approach. K-12, because every student deserves an inspiring place to learn. Visit kay-twelve.com today.
All right, the next one is kind of the homecoming scene. Was there like a big scene that, you know, it's the build up, basically the build up of the movie in there? Yeah. How do you guys want to take that one?
I mean, when I was reading kind of what you guys had put together, I viewed the basketball scene as kind of like a really integral part of understanding these characters. It's also the most stereotypical high school moment of the entire movie. Like you could pull that right out of High School Musical, right? Yeah.
Didn't High School Musical pull that straight from this movie?
That's what they did, yeah. And then in the director's cut of High School Musical,
they send him
Troy Bolton goes in and just mows down everybody else, you know. But I think, like I said earlier, I just think that seems so important to not only establish that these are real kids in a real school that have real lives and care about each other and that they're normal, that these are not murderers. But also it's like the most high school scene in the whole movie.
I have so many issues with sporting, how sports are portrayed in movies. And this was like one of those where it was like, what are they showing? It's like every single play is the last play of the game. Like, like the amount of enthusiasm and cheering for literally every second of that.
And they're all layups.
All layups, yeah. And yeah, just like how much they were cheering for it. I mean,
well, that was the end of all four quarters. I think is what you saw is the final shot of all four quarters.
I think also that, like the final scene with Kiriyama is kind of like the crescendo with I don't know what was going on with his eyes, but
yeah, I have that too, that twitchy eye thing. That was
it was kind of going crazy. But you know, obviously, you know, your final moment with Kiriyama. It was also kind of a crescendo. The fire in the background, blood coming down his eyes, like it was.
Oh yeah, he got blinded from like an explosion.
Yeah, that was like the crescendo, and then it kept going, and I'm like, holy smokes! Okay, we got to keep going.
Yeah,
got more to do.
Did if we move on to the next one, is there a one-liner? Was there like a one line that you would say was your favorite line of the movie?
I had one.
Yeah.
That because I was such a fan of Mitsuko, her dying line for me, at least, was something that I think everyone can relate to, and it was, I just didn't want to be a loser anymore. Right? She's dying. She's gone off by herself. She's actually killed a bunch of people. She was trying to win. And in her dying moments, all she said was, I just didn't want to be a loser anymore, and then dies. And I think that there were so many times in my high school, and I'm sure everyone can relate to that so well, is, you know, you do something dumb, people make fun of you, you know, things don't go your way, baseball game doesn't go well, your girlfriend breaks up with you, whatever. You just don't want to be that loser at school. And that is like a driving force for every student. I don't want to be the loser. I don't want to fail this class. I don't want to. It's never like I get to. It's like I don't want to not do this, right? Like, so I thought that was interesting from Mitsuko.
Yeah, the thing that's, I think, unique about school is that is probably not found anywhere else, is that there is no bottom floor when it comes to the social ladder of school for students. There is always somewhere further down that you can go, in terms of like the public perception of school, right? So you could be the most popular kid in school and you could do something dumb and it'll knock you down 4 rungs. Or you could be at the very bottom of the barrel. You know, this poor girl in my high school who had a rolly backpack. Remember one time she slipped and fell on the stairs, fell on top of the rolly backpack and went bum, 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 all the way down the stairs. and she went down further on the social ladder after that. And it's like how there is no bottom. And I think that is exactly what Mitsuko is talking about, which is like she don't want to be a loser anymore because everyone in this school wanted to try and stay at least get a little further ahead, a little further ahead. I love that quote. Let's see, there's one I had too. It's the first kind of like quote card we get. We get a few of these, and next time I watch it, I'm gonna kind of like capture, like take a picture of all of them and kind of layer them next to each other. But the first one we get, which is such a jarring juxtaposition, is do you like anyone at school? Is there anyone you love? Which is like the first card we get. And this is after we've now watched, I think, 4 kids get killed. And now we're asking ourselves, is there anyone at school that you like? And it's such like it brings you back to, oh, these kids are like 13. And yes, we just watched a girl get shot in the neck with an arrow, one get hit in the face with a throwing knife. But yeah, these are like children. And this is what they're worried about in their day-to-day is, do you like anybody right now? Do you like anybody at school? And then we don't actually get to see that scene for another, I think, 10 minutes. And then it cuts to the scene of Shuya and the actual class clown, his friend, sitting in their like bunk beds together talking. And he asks him that question. I just think that quote, given its placement, I think is one of my favorites. I think that it's such a jarring moment to kind of like bring you back to earth.
Yeah. Well, those are good. I had more a serious one. It was at the end, where it was said at the end, I'm just glad I found a true friend. That was, to me, like kind of pulled everything in. Then I had some just like really dumb ones that I thought were hilarious. There was one, and I haven't noticed, there was some scene where a guy is yelling at the waiter. Do you remember this one?
Yeah, the dad when they're at the restaurant.
Yeah, and I said in a minute, and it was just like so like like it just felt so out of place that I was cracking up at that one. And then Katano, just when he comes out with an umbrella, like here everyone's killing each other, and he comes out with an umbrella and says, "Don't catch a cold."
There's a couple other like
when
he goes, of course, a pot lid, and he pulls out a pot lid as his weapon.
He's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Everyone has like grenades and scythes and everything around him. He's got a pot lid.
Yeah, that's really funny. And then she's got binoculars.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the realistic or ridiculous. A lot of times, like this is where we can get into some like real life lessons and and apply it to school today. Obviously, the whole like premise of this is just ridiculous when you look at the real world. But there's actually a lot of realistic things. I think you've alluded to some of that already. Anything stand out for you as far as like what was like pretty realistic?
For me, having graduated high school and college and moving on into my career, it really is a battle royale, because in the end, any company, brutal. High school's brutal. If high school is bad, like real life experience, man, coming into your career, the speed at which you get replaced at work, instant, right? You quit, you're getting replaced. You get fired, you're getting replaced, right? The speed at which the world continues to move, no matter how old we are, is played out really well. Like the game doesn't stop to, at least this game doesn't stop to honor, except for every six hours, they honor, not even honor, just read the names of those that are gone, right? And then it's off, and we're going to add more danger zones. I just feel like there's always something more to worry about in life, not just in high school, but in life. And I think that's a really easy story or easy kind of lesson to learn from this movie.
Yeah, man, that makes me think of one of my first jobs, like after college, and we would all have like magnetic name plates that we would put like on our cubes, and every time somebody would get fired or quit, I used to just I would go grab and I would take their magnetic nameplate, and I didn't even work there that long, but I had this file cabinet, this metal file cabinet that just had all these names wrapped around of it, of just, you know,
The
people that have come
graveyard
and
of
gone. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right though. It does come and
And
go
then they
pretty
fill up
quickly.
that spot the next week, you know.
That's
It's
right.
just
Next
like
one, and then you'd be
on
like,
to the
"Oh, I forgot
next.
about that person." Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is the one that, so the question is, you know, when you ended up getting, you know, let go, or you left, does the person who took yours, did they get all of the other ones, and now it's just
I
kind
don't
of like
know, man. I would
inherited?
love to find out if that
Someone's got
survived. If there was,
5,000 of these name cards. Yeah, I mean, for me, the realistic portion, yes, this movie is like I said, like, you know, this movie's so obviously over the top. But I do think that the satirical tone is to highlight that dog eat dog nature of high school adolescence. You know, everything, like I said, is life or death at that age. And well, I think that the parallels aren't exactly one to one, because life in Japan as a teenager is not necessarily the same as it is for Americans. Um, but I think that feeling of, I'm in this weird kind of limbo. I don't know where I'm going to be by the time I'm done with this. And if I remember right, I believe that like there's a fairly significant like dropout rate as well, at least at this time, I think, in Japan. So it's almost as if high school itself was this battle royale of like who's going to be the remaining graduates. Um, and so I think, you know, I do think that this movie is ridiculous, but I think that there's realism
Yeah.
in, if you're able to kind of like pull back the curtains a little bit and try and pull some things out.
yeah. The two things to me that I thought were realistic in was, doesn't matter what's going on. It could be killing people. It could be just normal school. At that age, hormones are everything, and they still are thinking about like who has a crush on who and who likes who.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get rid of it. Like at that age,
Yeah.
it's just so. And I think as adults, you know, especially, you know, like you're looking at this and be like, well, why you want to be, you know, focused and like thinking about like, you know, like their whole life ahead of them and what's the next stage after high school. At the end of the day, I mean, those hormones
That's all they care
are
about.
the number one driving force of their decision making.
Yeah, and how many times did we have a death scene that essentially ended with someone either confessing a crush,
Yeah.
asking about a crush, or like begging for a crush, right? Like that. It's these people's dying thought was, "Do you like me? Because I like you." It happened over and over again.
Yeah.
Or they would die with their crush, or they would die with the person that they loved in order to not be separated. It's like the first thing that one couple does is they walk to the cliff and they jump off together.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That, so the other aspect that I thought was realistic, you know, if you kind of take this analogy through, is that we still live in a very like if you go into like a higher performing school, where I always say there in schools there's usually two different things. There's usually we want to get more kids into college, or if it's a higher performing school, their philosophy is we want to get our kids into better colleges. And I do think there's an aspect of that where, you know, like this hyper competitiveness of, you know, like there's only a few spots, does kind of overwhelm things and really kind of shifts priorities, probably, you know, definitely in the wrong direction of saying like, oh, I got to be better than them. I got to get a better GPA, or I need to join more clubs, or, you know, because that, you know, in those higher performing schools, they are so focused to getting those acceptances into the colleges they want.
There was a moment where one of the girls basically goes, "If I survive, can I go home?" And Kitano, the teacher, goes, "Yeah, if everyone else dies, right?" And so kind of similar, like, hey, I want to go to a better school. Either I have to be better than everyone, or everyone has to be worse than me, right? And it just plays out, you know.
Yeah,
I'm curious, Kevin. I'm going to ask you this: where do you see the realism in the ridiculousness with Kitano? Because I think that Kitano is such an interesting character, because I feel like I've had teachers that are very much like him, where he wants to pit us against each other or against him specifically. I remember my physics teacher in high school I'm going to call it Mr. Pugh. I hope you're listening to this podcast. um, and
he's going to get a link sent to his email after this.
I will personally send it to him.
I don't think he has a school email anymore.
Yeah, he is no longer employed as a teacher. But he would actively be antagonistic towards us in order to try and either bait people into doing something that would get them sent to the principal, or to bait people into something that he could put them in detention, or to just kind of like razz us up. And that antagonistic nature towards us turned all of us off immediately to wanting to learn from him. We wanted nothing to do with him. In fact, we used to have I'm not going to admit to too much on this podcast. So actually about the kind of student I was in my physics class in high school, but not engaged like at all. And while I loved almost every one of my teachers in high school, we hated him. And when I watch Kitano, I see a lot between the two of them. So I'm curious, where do you see, in your interactions with teachers, both good and bad, where do you see the realism with Kitano?
Yeah, it's interesting because thanks for setting up a question that's going to get me into a lot of trouble.
Let's go.
But there is some realism to this, in that there is a certain level where a teacher that may have had good intentions is now, they don't want to be there anymore. They just don't want to be there anymore. And I really think it's one of the biggest issues that we need to address, because I don't blame them. I blame the system. And I'm seeing it. I'm in my late 40s. So I see a lot of like people in my age group. They're actually flipping the mentality right now, where they got into education because they really cared about it. And now it flips to now saying, when can I get out? And I really think it's probably the biggest issue in our system right now, is that that's a system issue. There's got to be a way to let people get out when they don't want to be doing it anymore, or move into a different role, versus saying, hey, I got 12 more years, or they start talking about the finish line in there. And I really think that is one of the biggest issues we need to solve, because it's a profession that, in a system that's set up where the biggest financial reward actually comes when they stop working. And that's a system issue. Like I can tell you, like when I took a job when I'm 24, there's no way I would want that job for another 30 or 40 years, but we're expecting people in this profession to do that. And so it's one that I'm pretty passionate about. I'm like, I think we actually just need to be paying people more for when they're in there, and then when they leave, they don't get all the benefits. Like, encourage people to leave. Maybe you only do this for 5 or 10 years, and then you do something else, and that's okay.
Look, the best teachers I had were the ones that wanted to be there and wanted to have fun with us and teach us. Brandon and I both have a special place in our heart for our English teacher, Mr. Jones, who did so much as to even sit down and let people come in and have lunch with him one-on-one and just talk about whatever. The conversations that I had with my principal, who wanted to be there, have been life-changing, career-changing for me. Like, he made it very clear, not just to the students, but also to his staff. Hey, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. We can move you on. We want to work with students and teachers that want to be here. We did go to a kind of college prep charter school for high school, and it was technically public, but you had to apply. You had to want to go there to get there, and we saw the results.
Yeah. And we talk about it all the time, and just, in the business world and on the corporate side, culture really matters. And one of the biggest things we talk about is the GWC of a role. Does somebody get what the role is? Do they want the role, which I think is the most important? And do they have the capacity to do that? And it's definitely an area that I feel like needs to be addressed by school leaders. It's sometimes hard because you got a lot of obstacles in there, but to your point, Brandon, I do think there are a lot of teachers they just don't want to be there. And in fact, they are not good teachers anymore. And that doesn't mean they weren't a good teacher at some point. But yeah.
I mean, because he shows up, not to belabor the point, he shows up wanting to teach them, and they are the ones at the beginning of the film who go, we're not going to show up today. And he then is like, okay, then I'm done. Like, I'm going to quit. Yeah. And then comes back, and the film says that they're randomly selected, but I think it's very clear that he chose them, right? And so he like gets his revenge on these kids that like don't want to learn. So, even the teachers who, let's get you out. But I think this film is also kind of saying like, who's the onus on? Like, where's the responsibility lie? Does the responsibility lie on the teachers, or does the responsibility also lie on students to be actively engaged, to care about, that these teachers that are showing up to try and help you, like there's a certain level of mutual respect that needs to be happening here. So
very cool. All right, we're running low on time here, so we got a few left here, but we'll probably skip a few of them. I want to hear the iPhone effect one.
Take this movie, add TikTok. That's all we need to say. It would be crazy. It would be chaos if you added TikTok and just give everyone a phone and let them have TikTok. That's it.
I think you could almost do this movie through like almost like a like found footage, but all TikTok live.
Yeah, like a Blair Witch.
Yeah.
Way where you're just like, you're just going through it and scrolling through, and you can see what one's doing over here and what's going on the other part of the island.
It's just a hashtag Battle Royale, and you can follow that hashtag.
You could
what's
actually
going on,
add
guys?
I
just showered after killing Shinada or whatever.
That would be a really interesting component to it too, because then you could also get like the reactions around the world.
Yeah, like who's got the most likes
happening.
Yeah.
That I mean, adding TikTok to this film would make it so much. It would be so entertaining to watch that, because it would make it funnier, right? You're gonna have those people that want to like go viral. There'd be a couple more dances going on, right? And then you can basically follow. Okay, who's actually doing all this killing? Oh man, I was just at that lighthouse. He's right behind me. And like it ramps up the fear in it, everything. I think that'd be hilarious.
Yeah. Yep. All right. The substitute. So if we were going to recast this, I guess anyone that you think you'd want to put in this, if we were going to recast this and put people in there, obviously I don't know any other Japanese.
So I did. If we remade this in America, who would we cast? Is what I did.
Yeah, I think that's the way I would look at this one. Yeah.
So I said for Shuya Nanahara, that's like the main kid. I feel like this type of movie just like defaults to like a Tom Holland. Like you need a kid who like has that kind of like youthful charm, but can also kind of bring a certain like emotional depth. Nakagawa, the girl, I went with Elle Fanning. She kind of has like that like little innocence to her. Yeah. For Kawada, I went with Ansel Elgort from Baby Driver. Baby Driver and West Side Story remake. And then Mitsuko was tough, but I think Zendaya could pull this off, and also like her trying to kill her fiance Tom Holland by the end of this. But I think the tricky one is to recast Kitano. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if Ben can guess who I cast here. So on the podcast, I always say that every movie can be improved by switching out someone with one actor. And that is Kurt Russell. So I would have Kurt Russell play Kitano. Because I think what's unique about the actor, whose last name is also Kitano, is that some people, Americans, may actually recognize him from something.
I was gonna bring this up.
What was he from? Because he did look familiar, but I didn't know.
So there's a show in Japan called Takeshi's Castle, which is essentially a Japanese game show, which was repurposed and redubbed.
Wipeout.
And it was repurposed and redubbed with fake dubbing into another show called. Go ahead, Ben.
It's called MXC.
MXC, Most Extreme Elimination Challenge. And growing up, Ben and I watched this every Saturday night.
It's so fun.
It's hilarious. And he is very fun and very he's very playful. And I think that's also part of the genius in casting him in this role, is that they cast him against type. And I think that if you cast Kurt Russell in this role, you're also casting against type. And you have someone that has an air of comfortability and an air of softness that you're weaponizing against the kids. And I think Kurt Russell would do that wonderfully.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I remember that show. That show was awesome.
Yeah.
I would take, real quick for me, I would take the entire cast of the Goonies at the time the Goonies was shot and pop them right in here in Battle Royale.
Yes. I like it. It's great.
Oh, yeah. See Chunks doing the truffle shuffle.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's great.
He'd eat the poison.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here, though. I mean, real life moment. I mean, you guys got a lot going on. Like, what's next for you guys? What are the things that you're looking forward to on your podcast or other things that you're working on?
So yeah, you can follow us on the Cinemast podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Our most anticipated movies of 2025 episode is going to be up and
releasing this week.
Releasing tomorrow. We have that's kind of what Ben and I do together. As for me, if you want any more like movie chatter, you can follow me on TikTok or Instagram, BrandonToksMovies. That's Toks, Toks. And yeah, that's like, I talk movies, I review them. I've got stuff. So if you're interested in movies, and if you're a big movie lover, you can follow me on Letterboxd as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Brandon mentioned it. Come check out the podcast. It's a lot of fun. And we talk about all sorts of things. If you like foreign films, Brandon's a big fan. We typically talk about one of them every couple of weeks, it seems like. So come check out the podcast. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for going through this. To the listeners, if you're not a subscriber, just hit subscribe wherever you're listening or watching this. And betterlearningpodcast.com is our hub for everything. So if you have ideas, you want to be a guest or have a movie or a certain topic that you want us to dig into, we get all of our suggestions through there. So Brandon, Ben, great meeting you. Thanks for running through this with
all
me.
Right.
It's a lot of fun.
Thank
a movie
you.
that I would have never watched if you did not put it on my
Good.
All righty.
I have to go.
All right.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thanks. See you
Yeah.
guys. The Better Learning Podcast is produced by Matt Rogers and edited by Kelly Jones. The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily represent the perspectives of their affiliated companies, organizations, or associations.